Hi there, I'm Sham. Welcome to unScene. In this episode, we will meet the new artistic director for the Alex Theatre in St Kilda, David Meadows. We'll also catch up with Peter Kalos, who interviewed Meredith Fuller, a media psychologist, and Brian Walsh. But first, Charlotte is with Warren Wills, who is an international multi-award-winning composer, pianist, musical director, recording artist, and educationalist.
So welcome, Warren. Thank you so much for coming in and speaking with me.
Charlotte, it's a pleasure. You got me on a good day.
Good to hear.
Good.
So your career is so vast. So I guess we should start at the beginning of where your interest started in the live performance world.
Well, first of all, can I say it's fabulous to do this interview from the Alex Theatre, to actually be in Melbourne and so far ahead of the rest of the field who are languishing on their fatter and becoming fatter derrieres at home in lockdown. So isn't it great to be out and about and artistically creative and re-emerging after this bloody slumber of 9 months, whatever it is. So that is great news. How did this all start? When I was 4 years old, I became obsessed and hooked on a Chopin album and never wanted to do anything after that except compose and play music. That was it.
Right.
So I've never had a choice. I've always been compelled to do what I do. And I went through all my grades as a kid, and my mum despaired, what am I going to do with him? So when I was 10, I'd finished all my grades, and she took me to Melbourne Conservatorium to meet a guy called John McCaughey, who is now the Dean of Music at La Trobe, or was, and he said, can you improvise in B-flat major? And I sat down as a cocky little 10-year-old, and he said, I'll take him. So every Saturday I used to go and have composition lessons at the conservatorium when I was 10. I used to love it, absolutely adore it. And that all went on till I was about 16, and then I started working for the government. I lied about my age, and I was working for the government teaching music. Then I joined the Mushroom Theatre Troupe when I was 18, and 21 I got a one-way ticket to Athens, left Australia, and the whole story changes.
Wow. And so what happened from Athens then?
Basically, I fell in love with music theatre. Up until that point, the primary focus of my entire life musically was the different genres of music. And my big thing in music is styles. My shtick, and I still do Hong Kong concerts today, I'll come out on stage with nothing prepared, and I'll go, give me a song. And someone, for example, will go, Flight of the Bumblebee. I'm doing this because this happened to me once. I say, give me a style. And someone said, Scott Joplin. I said, right, that's the first song, so that's what I have to play.
So it's improvised music.
It's not just improvised music, it's improvised stylistically and thematically. So, for example, you could well ask the question, doesn't it get interesting if someone suggests a song that I don't know? I get them up, they sing it, and people are amazed. I'll hear the melody, work the melody out, work the chordal accompaniment out, and then play it back in any key, in any style. And when I say styles, flamenco, tango, bluegrass, reggae, Shostakovich, jazz, pop, hip-hop, whatever you want. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
I can't change a tire on a car or make lasagna, but when it comes to that kind of stuff, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you'll stick to music and not so much cooking.
That's it.
Yeah, right. That's incredible. So how are you able to shift between so many different genres and styles of music so quickly?
Okay, when I was very young, I only listened to classical music. Then I got a real wow when I got my first pop record, which is a guy long before your time called Cat Stevens, right?
I know Cat Stevens.
Okay, and so then I got into heavy metal. Then my life changed again when somebody mentioned jazz, and it was a guy called McCoy Tyner, who was John Coltrane's pianist. I heard do a 40-minute improvised arrangement of my favourite things. Raindrops and Roses, from Sound of Music. My head, my little young head, spun out. I thought, that is it. That is where I have to be. Then I got into Chick Corea, who sadly passed away last week, who was one of the most influential musicians of our generation, of our lifetime. And then it went on from there. But then I started to get into things like ethnic music. Having worked with Esteban Antonios, I got into flamenco. Then having worked with Antonio Torres, I got into zarzuela. Having worked with Ilham Al-Madfai, I got into Arabic music. And so styles is my thing.
Wow, that's
so
incredible.
if you say, play Happy Birthday in 26 different styles, I'd say, I'm your man.
I don't know why we don't have a piano set up for you.
God damn it. Bring that piano in. Come on. That's it.
Yeah, right. And so you've obviously worked all across the world. And
Correct.
You've worked in America. And can you tell us a little bit about your time there?
Interesting enough, the more unusual and exotic the place, the more excitement is for me, because my whole shtick, I get excited about styles. If I'm in my comfort zone, I tend to put on weight, get fat and lazy. So if I'm challenged, I remember the first time I worked with a guy, an amazing oud player called Ahmed Mukhtar. And I'm not shy in asking questions. So I want to know, like, what's the tuning? What's the key? What's this and that? I want to absorb like a sponge. I need to get all this information. For example, I've worked 70 trips to Hong Kong at Hong Kong Academy of Performing Arts, the Fringe Festival, and I used to do the Edinburgh Festival, which is one of the great festivals. I did 26 Edinburgh festivals on the bounce from 1982, and one of the acts that I worked with, hi if she ever watches this, is Adele Anderson from Fascinating Aida, who are just fantastic. Comedy, class, topical, just beautiful. And obviously affected really badly by the pandemic because they were in the middle of a UK tour and it was all pulled. But I was doing a show with Adele and we were invited to go to Hong Kong, and subsequently every year thereafter I went to Hong Kong in January with acts from the UK for the Hong Kong Festival. But the more I went over there, the more I got into kind of, what was popular with Chinese music. So I'm one of the few people who can play you The Moon Represents My Heart by Therese Tang. Who? Exactly. Anyone in China. It's a bit like, it's funny, there's a guy called Vladimir Vysotsky, a Russian guy. You find anyone from the Soviet Union, mention his name, tears will come down, universally. There's a guy, a Belgian guy, but who's the most famous Frenchman, non-Frenchman, Jacques Brel. People don't know him. Another one, it's just the most amazing. There are so many gems, so much music out there, it's fantastic. So why limit yourself to what's happening sort of around you? It's a big world, go and check it out.
Absolutely.
So in answer to your question, so yes, Hong Kong was an absolute pleasure and a joy for me, total joy. It's really sad what's happened recently. I went to Hong Kong many, many times, and I was there 6 months before the handover in '97, and there was clearly a real climate of fear. What's going to happen? The communists are coming. And certainly 6 months after I left, there they came, all these young, thousands of them, the PLA, the Chinese People's Liberation Army, and they bounced into town. 6 months later, it was more decadent than it's ever been. And it was interesting, on the south side of the island, Port Stanley is where the British squaddies used to hang out. They used to come out on a Sunday and have a beer with all the local population. Everyone loved it. And I said, as a PR exercise, wouldn't it be great? The Chinese should get out of their barracks on a Sunday and come and mix with the locals. And it was explained to me, they can't do that because the most feared people on the island are the poorest. They get paid virtually nuppence from Beijing. I don't believe that. I reckon they're given official orders to stay in their barracks, but what do I know?
Thank you so much for coming in and speaking with me today. It's been a really wonderful experience to chat with you.
A great pleasure. Next time I come, you'll even offer me a cup of tea. How good would that be?
Next time.
Thank you.
Meredith Fuller is a media psychologist and has been working in the industry for over 30 years and has consulted with journalists, radio hosts and social media sites on a wide range of topics. She has appeared on television, documentaries and radio programs and has written an extensive range of articles. Peter Kalos spoke to Meredith and Brian earlier.
Hi, I'm Peter. I'm here with Brian and Meredith. We're going to talk about filmmaking and the whole process, what brings your ideas here, how you get the ball rolling, the final product, and the reason why we do this. Welcome, guys. How are you?
Thank you.
Great.
I'm going to ask you the same question as earlier. What made you get into filmmaking?
I'm a psychologist. I've been working as a psychologist for 30 years, and I love films.
Right.
I've been a lover of film since I was about 15. My favourite director is Stanley Kubrick. And in my practice, I see about 50% women, 50% men. What I've noticed working with men over that period of time is that they really struggle to identify thoughts and feelings related to how they are in the world. So things like, what am I feeling now? How am I feeling it? What does love mean to me? What does anger mean to me? How do I define my emotions? Etc., etc. And what I noticed was men were not very good at that. And I started to piece together that as a result of that, we're seeing a whole lot of issues around men in the society that we live in. We know, for example, in domestic violence, 97% perpetrators are men.
Right.
So we know that if you've got 100,000 call-outs for the ambulance for males, over 60% of those are related to drugs, alcohol and gambling. So we know there are lots of issues out there. And as a result of talking with men and realising there's something that we're not talking about here, I decided to make some documentaries about it. So I made a trilogy. First one was Men and Crying. And basically men said to me, I don't cry. I was never encouraged to cry. I was taught that crying was weak.
Right.
I actually interviewed men who were in their 60s who said they'd never cried in their life. I just found that mind-boggling.
Even privately?
Even privately. And you know where men cry, where they feel okay? At the pictures.
Oh, of course.
When they go to see movies.
Yes.
Then I was talking to men about anger. And a lot of men couldn't talk about their anger because they think anger is related to violence. And so isn't it interesting that we have things like road rage?
Right.
Instead of somebody being able to say, well, that guy just cut me off, I'm feeling very angry about that. What am I going to do about it? Make a logical, rational decision about it? No, I'm going to get out at the next set of lights and punch him.
So it goes from 0 to 100?
Yes, and there's nothing in between. And there's no language for it either, because we don't encourage people to talk about
And because they don't know the language, they literally go to the extreme.
They explode.
Because they don't know, they're not comfortable in the middle.
And the third part of the trilogy was Men in Love. So I would talk to men about love and they'd say, you mean sex? I'd say, no, I mean in a broader sense.
Yeah.
And what became very clear is that, and this is part of what Meredith and I are doing at the festival, we're showing a film and talking about what is love? What is this phenomenon that we call love? Because everybody seems to want it, everybody seems to look for it, it seems to be high on everybody's priority, but we're not actually very good at talking about it and at giving it words and making it meaningful and real. Instead we get the Hollywood version of it.
And probably men feel it's soft.
Yes.
If I express I want love,
yes.
I want affection, I want to communicate with someone, and you do feel soft like that. It's not that hard image that we have.
I've worked with men over that period of time who have never told their partner that they love them. Again, I find that mind-boggling. But so we've got a whole lot of work to do around these issues, and hence the films. And they'll be shown in the June component of the festival.
Interesting. When I was living in LA, a friend of mine was having an affair on his wife. Mm-hmm. And I was on the phone with him. He was confessing. Hung up the phone, his wife called me and said, I know he's having an affair. And I said, how did you know? And she said, it's the way he said, I love you.
Yes.
Because he's never said it.
Right. Isn't that interesting?
That stayed with me. I called him up, I said, hey, he said, what do you mean? I said, you've never said I love you. And in that moment, he must have felt guilt, love, and she must have picked up. It resonated. It wasn't what we call neck up. It was heartfelt and honest. And she heard, I thought, what a beautiful moment. Sad, but beautiful.
Yes.
You know, they worked it out, which was nice, but it's because of that. She said, I heard the love in his voice.
Yes.
My experience was a little different. So as well as theatre acting, I also did film. So I did a lot of work on Homicide, which was an iconic television show.
I remember
way
it.
back.
I'm not way back. I remember it. I remember it.
And while I loved any kind of filmmaking, the thing that I was most interested in was how do you enable people to understand and feel for the protagonist, and that's the interest I have. So with my filmmaking, I look at issues that concern us about personality type, who we are as people, and some of the quirky issues that perhaps we need to talk a little more about. So recently we made a film about stalking. Oh. And we made it from the point of view, and I guess this is this thing about helping an audience to appreciate how complex it is. What if your therapist stalks you? What if you're a client stalking your therapist? What if your partner's stalking you? What if your grandmother's stalking you? Really opening these things up, and film gives us a great opportunity to absolutely zero in and enable the actor to take us inside, whereas theatre shows a slightly different element. So I love the idea of doing some film and some theatre, and sometimes combining the two so that we can actually help people to understand who are we as people, why have we got different personalities, how does this impact on how we communicate, how we have relationships. Show me, show don't tell, and that's what I love about film.
Film has that capacity. I went to a school, I won't say which one it is, it's a writing school here, quite prominent in Melbourne. And they invited me, because I used to work for Paramount as a script doctor, and they invited me to read their scripts. 80% of them were set in America. I said, you've never been. You've never been. Well, if I have a better chance of making, I go, no, we need your voice. We need our voice, our films made right here with our, whatever the culture is, label it. But it has to be human first. A friend of mine from New York said, he's a good producer. He said, you guys cast the stereotype. We cast the human being who happens to be that stereotype, but the human factor has to be there. And we need to address that.
And I think that's important why the psychology of people is so critical when you're talking about filmmaking. We need to understand the psychology behind people, the complexity of people, the nuance. And if we can get that right, you can make anything interesting.
Well, everyone would identify it across the world. Doesn't matter what culture they are from, human is human.
And of course what makes it fascinating is our country, like, you know, make a film at Aireys Inlet, an amazing place.
I've never seen it. Not enough. I mean, I've been there, I know it, I get it.
I don't need to see an American
12 Apostles,
beach,
all these little things. No, Melbourne. When's the last time you saw Melbourne? For Melbourne.
Exactly.
They don't know it, but there's potential there now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our time has come to an end. Thank you very much. Take everything in, turn up to the festivals, get to know these two lovely filmmakers and writers, and get your own art out there. It's important, it matters, and needed. Take care, guys. I love this. I really did.
Great.
Thanks
Take
very
care.
much.
Thank
you.
With a career spanning more than 30 years, David Meadows has played some of the most iconic roles in theatre ever. This includes Hamlet, Macbeth, Romeo of Romeo and Juliet, and the list just goes on. David is also an acting coach as well as an experienced producer, director and filmmaker. David has recently been appointed by the Alex Theatre as their new artistic director. And he joins me now. Hey David, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us at Unseen today. Let's give our viewers a little overview of who you are and what you do.
Today I am busy, as always, with way too many projects on the go. But that's cool, because I'd rather that than be bored. And what am I doing? I have no idea.
So David is an actor, and what are the many other things that you do?
Actor, director, producer, filmmaker, I occasionally write. A bit of everything, really.
You've got your fingers in many pies, like a lot of actors these days, I feel.
I believe the term is slashy.
A slashy, yeah, not slasher. Let's make that distinction.
Yes,
slashy.
Not since, no.
Maybe we'll touch on that later. So tell us a little bit about how you got started.
Oh, wow. I grew up in the country, and there wasn't an awful lot to do in the country for anyone, really. And one of the sort of we had a beautiful theatre in the town I grew up in Western Australia. Really, really beautiful old picture house that they'd done a whole lot of work on the backstage of, and there was a huge fly tower.
And what town was this?
Meriden, about halfway between Perth and Kalgoorlie. And on the highway, so it was a major town, and it was a sort of a farming town primarily. And my dad worked for a grain handling company, but like a lot of other people in the town, the main focal point was the local amateur theatre group. And he did a lot of work with them, and was the president for a couple of years and secretary for a bunch of other years. And I just sort of fell in love with the theatre and the atmosphere and the vibe and the sort of the camaraderie and everything about it. And also just the magic of it. And I also, Dad used to watch a lot of those old Hollywood movie musicals, Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, Gene Kelly, all that kind of stuff. And I just fell in love with the whole thing. And so I kind of always decided that's what I wanted to do. And nothing else seemed to really appeal. And I just, as soon as I moved out of home, moved to Perth, the first thing I did was sign up with a couple of local amateur theatre groups and just start doing Amdram. And then I just decided, right, this is it. I'm in love with it. Went to Whopper and did the standard thing. And just been sort of plugging away in the trenches ever since as a jobbing actor, director, slashy.
Well, David, let's chat about your recent appointment as artistic director to the Alex Theatre. Woohoo! How did this all come about?
Oh, well, actually, interestingly, that came about through Shakespeare as well.
All right.
2015, I went to London to do the International Actors Fellowship. Couldn't remember the name of it for a second there. At Shakespeare's Globe, and I met a whole bunch of amazing people who I've subsequently done shows with in Mexico and in South Korea, and who are also part of this online company that I'm now doing the complete works of Shakespeare with, which is a project we started here because my friend Natalie Barron, who's New Zealander, but I think she still lives in London now. But she and I came here with a view to possibly doing a production with the company, a live production, in the studio. And that didn't happen for a variety of different reasons, but one of the things that came out of it was that Alan Rendell turned around and said, why don't you let's do some sort of Shakespeare thing here. We want some Shakespeare here. So I said, all right, let's just monthly readings of each of the plays. In chronological order over 4 years, like 10 per year at the end of every month. So that's what we did, and they've now moved online. They had to during COVID, but we're keeping them online because I like that form.
Oh.
And out of that, I guess I just continued to build the relationship with the Alex because it was co-presented by the Alex. And I just kept sort of hanging around, really, I suppose, like a bad smell. And I suppose at some point, Alan kind of went, well, he seems to have... he seems to be reasonably tenacious and ambitious with his Shakespeare shows, so let's give him a go.
So here you are.
So here I am.
Amazing. Well, it's very exciting for you.
It's extremely exciting.
What are your plans now that you are artistic director?
To go crazy Broadway style. And that's actually pretty accurate. That's pretty much what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I really want to do, one of the things I love about this building is the different spaces that it has and the different things that it can support. And I love the vision of it being a kind of an equivalent to an off-Broadway house. Bigger than the smaller spaces where a lot of people tend to do their profit share shows. Not as big as like the Princess or the Athenaeum or whatever, where you want to do something of a reasonable scale. So it's a really nice kind of bridge between those two worlds, and it gives the people who do the bigger stuff an opportunity to do something a little bit smaller and more experimental, and the people who do the smaller stuff to step up and see if they've got what it takes to do something bigger.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of keeping it diverse, so that it's not just about kind of quirky off-Broadway musical theatre, which I love, and there's going to be plenty of that, goodness knows, but also keeping a solid mix of new work, classics. Every artistic director job I've ever applied for, when I write out a sort of basic season plan, it generally tends to be a nice, healthy mix of everything: 20th century classics, pre-20th century classics, new work, experimental stuff. I think if you're in a town like London, you can afford to be a little bit more specialist. You can say, oh, this company's about this, because you've also got that company like literally just down the road that does that, and another company just around the corner that does the other thing, and you can be a little bit more specialised. And I think a building like this gives us real scope to diversify and mix up audiences and content, and I'm really excited by the possibilities. It's got a little bit of comedic musical theatre, it's got a little bit of serious, slightly more serious subject matter. It's got a little bit of, there's opera elements coming in. There's, a Shakespeare. There's a couple of brand new pieces that are being workshopped here. There's a couple of pieces that have been around for years. Just as a kind of hastily cobbled together first season, it's pretty diverse.
Good.
I'm excited by it.
Yeah, amazing. It sounds like it's nice and broad ranging. So
well, yeah, you get a little finger in every pie. And
yeah.
And that's the great thing is if something doesn't work, it's kind of like repertory in a lot of ways. If something works, you keep it in.
Yeah.
If something doesn't, okay, thanks, but
next
bye.
time. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming in today, David. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for the first time in unseen history, we have Charlotte Watson actually in person in the space. Welcome, Charlotte. It's good to see you.
Thank you. It's good. It's good. I'm glad that I'm no longer on Zoom and actually in the studio.
Yeah. I mean, the giant head was it was a choice,
Yeah.
but it was the only choice that we could make at the time.
I mean, like on these screens, it makes a lot of sense, but you know, I'm happy to be here.
Well, your skin looked great, so
thank
it must have been all that Sydney sun. Oh God! So Charlotte, what's exciting in the world of Melbourne theatre at the moment?
Well, there is actually quite a few things going on that I had a bit of a read about. So Malthouse is doing a lot of things. They've got their open air concerts that they're having at the moment. There was Eddie Perfect was doing a show. They're also doing a immersive theatre experience.
I saw that. Yeah.
Because the Night, I think it's called. And I think what they're doing is they're turning the Malthouse Theatre into this huge immersive theatre space that audiences can walk through and watch different parts of performances like any other immersive sort of show. So yeah, that sounds really exciting.
And
That's
I feel
in
like
March.
the Malthouse is such a, like, if you've ever been to the Malthouse, it's very like, there's lots of levels, there's lots of secret rooms, and it would be incredible to turn that whole space into an immersive show. Wow.
Yeah, and especially after COVID, I think like having a thing where people can move through at certain times as well is such a good idea. So, yeah.
Well, I was actually thinking about this, like, you know, navigating the world of that sort of stuff and COVID safe theatre. Immersive work would actually be really great because you can have like small bubbles of audience clusters, right? You don't have to deal with them like en masse, and yes, they'll be moving through a space, but they can be like sanitizing procedures in place and
Halfway through the show.
Oh, well, just sanitize, or I don't know, find some dramaturgical reasoning for sanitizer, who knows?
Yeah.
No, it's a cool idea. Well, cool. Well, we'll have to check that out. And it's called what again? Because the Night?
Because the Night.
Because the Night.
There's also Melbourne International Comedy Festival, which is coming up, which is really exciting. I'm very excited for that. I've already picked out a couple of shows that I want to go to.
Wow.
So I know that Malthouse is actually housing some of those comedy festival shows, so some of the bigger names are going there. That'll all be kicking off, hopefully, COVID permitting. It's not going to get cancelled again.
Let's hope. Let's hope. With Comedy Fest, do you feel like there's still like quite a big international lineup, or do you think it's mostly local?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, just because I was
Off the
thinking
top
with
of my
COVID.
head, off the top of my head, the ones that I can think of are actually Australian, the bigger performances. So I don't recall actually seeing any international performers. I'll have to go and check that out. I know there is one Scottish comedian coming over. He's got a show, so I'm assuming maybe he's already here.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah, you
that
must be.
Arch Barker lives here as well.
Arch Barker does, yeah.
and he's great. So I'm
Yeah,
excited for that too.
cool.
Hopefully he's doing a big show. Yeah.
Because I was thinking about all of that, you know, the future of like touring shows and how much more tricky it's going to be with having to do your isolation for 2 weeks and all of that. And I know that Adelaide Fringe has had a significant decline in international performers.
Well, you were supposed to go to the Adelaide Fringe.
Let me tell you, I was meant to be flying back from Adelaide on Tuesday, but a couple of days before I was meant to actually do the flight over, they shut the border and they announced that they were shutting the borders like at midnight that night. And I had to make that call of like, do I do a mad rush to get there before midnight and just drive now, which is going to be next to impossible, or do I just count my losses and say, it is what it is, this is COVID now? And I did that. And I mean, I was actually really blessed because the day that I cancelled that, I put up a sad, sappy status on Facebook saying, oh no, like basically F you 2021. And another producer for a show that's based in Melbourne, the Sangam Festival, she messaged me and she was like, hey, I really wanted to invite you to perform at our show. I know you're not going to Adelaide. Do you want to come perform for us instead?
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you win some, you lose some. So I was very happy to be doing that instead. But I do know that unlike myself, some of the other people meant to be going to Adelaide didn't get so lucky. Some, however, did do the mad rush, packed their cars up, drove straight over the border that night. A couple of performers got exemptions, and like, I got to take my hat off to those performers who were so committed to just like make a show happen. For me, it was like I was doing a few spots and a few cabaret shows. It wasn't
it wasn't your own show.
It wasn't my own show.
Yeah, right.
But like I have some friends from Scratch who they do like productions and parties and all sorts of like live performance art events. They had a 2-week season and they were like, we can't,
Sorry,
let's just pause that.
that's your alarm.
Yep, I'll wrap it up.
Shut up! Sorry.
That's okay. I'm going to go from scratch. And I had some friends from scratch who do a lot of productions and like performance art kind of events, and they had a 2-week season. So I know that they just packed up as soon as they could and got their asses over there.
Yep.
And luckily have had a really fun, successful season.
Oh, that's good.
Ironically, the borders are maybe opening up tonight. And so I was just like, But look, it is what it is. Adelaide Fringe is a time, but I do know that there's a lot fewer performers and shows happening. It's probably one of the smaller fringes, but
yeah, well, hopefully by the time the Melbourne Fringe rolls around in September, October, I think, hopefully would have figured out a better way to approach shows with COVID. And,
exactly. And actually, you were telling me before that the Common Rooms, is it? Was
so they've
opening up
got
applications?
so Fringe has got their artist EOIs happening at the moment for the Common Rooms, which is exciting. So I'm going to have a little look at that.
And hot tip as well, it's 5 different artists get $5,000 in cash for a grant. So get on those applications.
Get on it. And that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for watching.
If you guys want to hit us up, send us an email at ideas@studioemedia.com.au. See ya.